Good afternoon, good morning where you are. So in this episode we're gonna do cloud tech panels. So so I'm Nicholas. I'm with my co-host Kevin Green.
Hey folks, so welcome along, and hope everyone had a nice Christmas and New Year's break. And we're right back in it now for the first week in January. So got
Yeah.
two really good speakers to help kick us off with our first one of the year. Looking forward to it.
Okay. So let's just do some housekeeping. So so stay with today. You can watch recording on LinkedIn, YouTube. Let me share my screen. Oh, sorry. My bad.
It's your old age now, Nick. Your birthday yesterday, so you're getting old and forgetting.
Okay. So as you say, you can keep up to date with this episode through LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and go through different episodes if you want. So remember to subscribe on YouTube if you want. And would like to do this one, Kevin?
Yeah, sure. So code of conduct. So all members of the group should adhere to this code of conduct, folks. Be friendly and welcoming, be patient, be thoughtful, be respectful, and obviously inclusive, and be open and curious. So don't be afraid to ask questions. And if you don't want to come onto the mic, we'll certainly, today's session is a little bit of an open kind of panel, but feel free to drop your questions and your queries into the chat and we'll pick them up, no problem.
Yeah. So the agenda today is that we're doing slightly different. So we're doing a Cloud Career Panelist by Steve Buchanan, Principal Program Manager, and Samuel Erskine. So apologies if I said it wrong. So it would close approximately, got it wrong, 8:40. And the next episode is on the 22nd this month. It's with John Archer by how to AZify your project. And we're doing another session, Intro to OpenAI by Gohan Michael, who's a Microsoft technical trainer. And the next is just pretty much, so this session could be more interactive panelists. So ask lots of questions and learn from these successful group of amazing people. Okay, I'll bring them on. Hello.
Hey guys, can you see me?
Hey, Sam. Hey, Steve.
Hey.
Hiya.
Long time no speak, Steve. I've caught up with Sam a few times in the last few months. To you in a while.
Yeah, it's like a mini reunion here. Love it.
It is. Like
Yeah.
CDM crew back in the house.
Yes.
What time is it over there with you, Steve?
It's 1:04 in the afternoon, so.
Okay, that's all right. It's not too bad.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah.
That's good. And so what way do you guys want to do this this panel? Obviously, it's around like kind of cloud careers. We can leave it kind of open. I know this is a topic that that you guys are really passionate about, myself as well. What kind of way do you want to do it? Do you want to? Well, we've got some questions we could ask, but do you want to I'm assuming take some questions and answers from the attendees, anyone that's online? I can curate them over to you guys if anything comes in, or had you got a different format in mind?
Yeah, so I think let's just kick off with the questions that you guys have, get the conversation going, and if questions roll in from the attendees online, you can slip those in and we can start to answer their questions, make this more interactive.
Perfect. I might throw a few curveballs at you as well, just so I know Nick has sent you some pre-canned questions, but I'll throw a few curveballs at you just to keep you on your toes. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good with that, Kev, because you know how this works. We prepare as much as we can. It's similar to your careers, right? And then you turn up and it's nothing like you thought about. So I think Steve and I, we have actually done a number of career talk collaborations, and one of them was really cool. It was the open source conference. It's the only one where I've been there, and we didn't know the audience because they weren't System Center audience or Microsoft audience.
Okay.
So it was far more generic. So Steve did a great job of outline in his career. And then I just rode on the shoulders of a giant and pretended I knew what I was talking about. I looked better on him than him on stage, but I always say Steve's got a face for TV and a voice for radio, which is a rare combination, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And I just sent the link backstage to a video recording of that session in case anyone wants to check that out. So
Oh, awesome.
Let me
Back
post
in-
it here.
back in 2017, we've learned quite a few more lessons since then.
Yeah. And at some point there'll be a shameless plug to my book as well, right? So Nicholas, um, I published a book in September. Actually, Kev should have a
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I have my copy.
and a lot of people have asked me about my career. So Steve's got that, and I think I've got one out here somewhere as well.
Okay.
Look at this. Look at this.
Yeah,
It's more than a shameless book, Sam.
there you go.
You need
So
to get
I'll
one.
say, yeah. So for your audience, if you really want to know about, my career journey, which includes some great help from these two folks here, and as an example, Kev gave me the tips on how to be a presenter at an event and what to do and not to do, and I actually put it in the book.
Yeah.
Tequila, midnight, and a session the next day, they don't go together. Don't do it.
Yeah,
That's some good sound advice.
don't drink and crowd.
Don't drink.
Oh
and
yeah.
drive.
It's just when people suggest let's just pop out for one last one, go to bed.
Yeah. Or is anybody going to the nightclub? Yeah, that's the time to just say, I've got a 7 a.m.
Yeah.
session. No.
Drink after all your sessions are done. That's the night you go out and you do your drinking, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. that's
And
true.
it's for soft drinks or responsible adult beverages. We don't know who's listening to this recording and stuff, but come and see myself and Kevin at the next event where Nicholas will be presenting. Because I saw him live in Prague, did a great job.
Yeah.
And it took me back to those early days when we were trying to copy other rock stars, right? And I'll say, you did a great job because you were yourself, and that's the best way to be.
Yeah.
So, in terms of
Okay.
the questions and stuff like that, let me hand back to the host. So let us know what you want
How-
to talk about.
Okay. So how should we ask? Okay. Should we? So the first question I got in mind is what inspired you guys to pursue a career in tech from early age to where you are now?
Who wants to take that first? So, what inspired you guys? We've got Steve, Sam. I know you guys years, right? And you guys know me.
Yeah.
We've all come from varying different roles and different technology stacks. But what inspired you? Where did you start? I always love hearing people's where I start stories, right? So, where did you start, and what brought you to where you are now? Not even necessarily the specific role, but the place that you are now, that you're here, well known in the community.
I'll jump in and talk about this, and I've talked about it a few times on different podcasts. But so I stumbled into tech, right, in my early days. I think I was like 18, and so when I got inspired to really be in tech and like put my 2 feet into it is when I ran into a really, I thought it was a big challenge at the time. It was a challenge for me. And so I had, my boss at the time, I was working at a company where we just offered IT services to other businesses, right? And there was a customer of ours in their controller, she needed to work from home. This was in the early days, right? And so she needed a remote connection, and he was like, hey, I need you to set up a VPN and tunnel in back through their network so she can work from home. And so I was like, I came into that job like as a PC tech, so I was learning how to build PCs and servers and security surveillance systems, and got into the networking. He was teaching me stuff, like I was actually making Cat5 cables and like all of that, right? And like all this stuff was new to me, and then I was handed that, and I had to figure it out. And that really intrigued me and inspired me, and I was able to figure it out. And that woman was so happy and so thankful that it was working and that she would be able to work from home. I was like, this is awesome. And then I started looking at salaries, right? And I'm like, people get paid what to do what? Okay, this is it for me, right? And to this day, that's what inspires me when I work with things like Kubernetes, or I work
Yeah.
with different things in cloud, or even just working to lead teams and help people with their careers. Like the challenges is what keeps it interesting and what inspires me, and being able to like see things through. Right, here's a problem. How do we solve it? How do we make this thing work?
That's awesome, and I think it's that passion. I think my 10 cents on no matter what career path you want to follow, when you find something that you're passionate about and something that like I don't feel like I'm working half the time. I really enjoy what I do. I love meeting people. I love troubleshooting, But it's that moment, Steve, when you solve that problem, and I'm sure there was a real for you. Obviously, the benefit to that lady that you set her up, you made a change to how she can engage in her job, but probably two levels for you. One, you fix the thing, right? It actually works. I managed to get this done, right?
Yeah.
And and like, whoa, that was cool. And then
Feel good moment.
yeah, and then all of a sudden you're seeing the benefit of that. So yeah, I think that's always, it's nice to get that kind of that buzz from a job, and regardless of what the job is, when you have that, I think every day is easy, to be fair. Sam, what's your kind of intro? I mean, obviously I know there's a whole journey, Steve and Sam, that we could go all the way through, but
Yeah.
what was your, did you have a moment like that kind of started you, or maybe got you thinking?
Yeah, indeed. And for me, I was born into tech because my dad was a tech entrepreneur,
Okay.
and my early days was hanging with his engineers. So my dad used to work for ICL. That's an old organization, and then later on ended up being a Wang distributor, an Apple distributor. But I wasn't interested in tech per se. How I fell into it was actually, um, when I think back now, was my first real mentor in tech. So I used to go and see my dad in his office, and those days the computer rooms were these ice boxes that it literally you froze to death if they kept you in there. So one of his engineers was called Rigsby, and servicing computers was literally going in with a vacuum cleaner and dusting it out. So I used to hang with them. They used to take me out on site, and my first real buzz was when I realized I could electrocute myself because he had these cathode ray monitors, but the back of it was all highly charged, but the cables around it were very highly conductive. And I was playing with some experiments. I went to touch it, and they dragged me back and said, "No, you need to make sure it's discharged." So they started walking me through, you know, the practical side of it. And I've always loved the real time computing. So that's where I got my first buzz and realized that, oh, hang on, um, it's used for something practical because they'll tell me if this breaks down, we can't send the phone bills out. If this breaks down, the electricity company can't charge it. So perhaps this is the first time maybe Steve and Kev are hearing this part. I've always, from a tech perspective, been driven by what it can do, not necessarily what it is. So that was my buzz, and um, seeing playing with my first Apple computer. It was an Apple IIc, And this is before Microsoft had interfaces. So they had that first wizard, and I can't mess with Apple now. I've forgotten how to use the interface. I've used Windows for that long. But back then, the Apple interface, when they had the GUI, that was the buzz. It's just playing Space Invaders with your keys and stuff like that. All right, I'll stop there. So that was my early part of it. And then once I got into education, I was laser focused. I went straight into doing electronics and computing, and then targeted that in uni. So I didn't want to go and do the normal subjects, because part of it, I'd seen my dad travel around the world, and I thought it would be really cool if you're in tech, you can travel. Because I grew up in Africa at that time, so it's like, tech was going to be my escape. How I was going to see the world.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And so Steve mentioned, born into tech is probably your new slogan. You used to have the geek by day, freak by night. I think born into tech is probably the next one, Sam.
Yeah.
I think, for me, I'll give a little bit of perspective as well. As a kid, I always loved trying to figure out how things work. It didn't matter what it was. How does that work? I was the one that would break things to understand how to fix them. And when I'm showing my age now, when Santa Claus brought me an Atari 2600, I thought this was awesome, right? The old, little games console. That was cool, but that was gaming, right? And the first real computer, quote unquote, that I got as a kid was a Commodore 64. And I love playing the games on it, like in the arcades and the amusements. But what really intrigued me was the basic programming language. Not that I'm actually a huge programmer. You guys that know me years, I'm not, like, the dev side was tough for me. It still is nearly. But I found it amazing that you could do something other than play games on a computer. I was probably only about 8 or 9 years old. And I remember typing for hours in the user guide or the manual that came with the Commodore, some program. They had a bunch of pre-canned programs at the end of the manual. I remember typing for ages and ages and ages. And then the screen just turned purple and it said, "Hello, Kevin." And I just thought, like, this is amazing. Like, it must have taken me hours. And of course, incorrect, missing a comma, syntax error. But I just felt there was something different there. And as I got a bit older then, I still didn't really know what I wanted to do kind of pre-college. Tech was coming in, and Ireland is a big tech hub now. We're small, but we punch well above our weight in terms of tech companies over here. But it wasn't always like that. And I kind of just said, look, the computer stuff, I really enjoy computers. I love fixing things. I love breaking things. Let's see where we go. But I ended up going more into the hands-on, the IT pro stuff, like all of you guys. Well, most of you guys. But yeah, it's brilliant to see the journey and where we've all kind of moved through the different levels. And even Steve, like the Kubernetes stuff that you do now, like, when we met first, you were Mr. DPM guy, right? Yeah. And I was Mr. SCOM guy, right? Like right. And Sam was service manager, right? So it's when you look at, some of the technologies that we've done over the years and we've learned and we've probably excelled in and moved through the ranks and then completely pivoted. DevOps to me now, I'm comfortable with it. Kubernetes to you, I'm not sure if that was ever not the technology, but the actual level of coding and the level of non-UI stuff that you do and you have to do in Kate's. I'm sure that may have not ever been on your radar when you were doing DPM and you were, resynchronizing volumes and stuff like that. But it's, once you're in that space, I think you can follow your nose really and just figure out what you enjoy and what way you want to bring it to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that speaks to the evolution of our careers and how folks evolve throughout their careers in tech, right? You might start out somewhere and you will be really surprised where you end up later on. And it's really important to keep yourself open to evolving. And like Sam has always told me, right? Don't be tied to the technology, right? One thing that is 100% consistent in our field is things are going to change, right? There's going to be change. And so we have to be adaptable. And also like thinking about back to the days of like DPM and System Center, and even like when PowerShell came in, right? It was like, whoa, for Windows guys, it was like, whoa, this is a totally different dynamic.
Yeah.
But that time spent in PowerShell doing that scripting, right? I remember back to the days when I was administering Exchange servers,
Yeah, me
right?
too.
And then all of a sudden it came out, it was like almost everything you could do or needed to do, you had to do in PowerShell.
Yeah.
So it's like you couldn't avoid PowerShell anymore. You had to be in PowerShell and you had to learn it. And just that experience was a precursor to setting me up and setting many others up to what we're doing today.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Nick, I want to hear yours because I'm going to come back to that, Steve, about
Okay.
skills.
So
In a while, I'll come back to that. But sorry, Nick.
Okay.
You started.
So for the viewers, what's DPM, Steve?
Oh, let's not go there.
Really?
You can use your favorite search engine. You can Google it, and you'll find out.
Okay.
It's called Data Protection Manager. Don't mind him. Steve wrote books on it. Steve, don't throw that under the carpet. Come on, dude. Come on. It's Data Protection Manager. It was Microsoft's backup product as part of the System Center suite as well. So
yeah, it's embedded into Azure. So, the thing that we need to recognize, because I mean, I started my journey in the data center world as a field service engineer, but in the Microsoft area, I hopped from into SMS 2003, which was then SCCM, and now you've got Intune. But most of the capabilities in Azure, Intune, and all of that, we were in the on-prem foundational parts of it, and it's the DNA and the pains we went through to make it work in its current state that the next generation is inheriting in terms of the feedback that we gave that's now been transformed into cloud products. And Steve's absolutely right. I mean, it didn't directly come from me. I did watch a tech ed session, and it's a guy called David Chappelle, and it's not the black comedian for those that are familiar with it. This is the tech evangelist, right? So if you're going to look it up, spell it right. Otherwise, you'll get some non-tech videos. But he was doing a session on the MSP, I think was the Microsoft Students program or something. He said, never fall in love with the technology because all technology dies, right? And that resonated with me. I've always fallen in love with what the technology can do. Kevin and I, and we've been through the Unix versus Microsoft wars. I've been through Novell versus Microsoft. Then it was the iPhone versus the Windows Phone, right? And then the Windows Phone, when Windows Phone came with Swipe, and now we've gone back to Android. Now iPhones are great for Microsoft. So every time I went to conferences, I always used to have fun because people would try and tell you only use this, and I'll be walking around with 3 different phones, different gadgets and devices, because it didn't matter. It's what it solved that mattered. And what I've enjoyed the most in terms of working with Kevin and Stephen, I'm going to call him Stephen for the first time. It's never been called that before live. And now with yourself, Nicholas, is going to the conferences actually was one of the biggest career boosters in my whole journey, because whenever you went in and met people, you realize the gaps you had, and they realized the gaps they had, and you had that exchange of information. So in terms of that journey, what I would also add is being open to interactions in spaces that you would never have considered was a big boost.
Yeah, and I mean sometimes as well, I totally agree. Conferences are awesome, and sometimes it's not. What I found in the early days of going to conferences, when I met some of you guys, even before I met you guys, was that these guys and girls or ladies who are presented on stage or who are writing books, when you actually meet them in person, the majority of them are just normal, super smart, but normal and really open and really friendly. And that's not just aligned to the MVP community, but yes, that's what the MVP community is about. And it really makes you understand that most people in tech are kind of built from the same cloth nearly, right? You follow your nose to the technology. I do fall in love with the technology, but I'm old enough now and I'm in the game long enough to totally realize, exactly as you said, Sam, that you have to be able to let it go and move on. And I think the skills that you learn over time, even for the real old school legacy technologies, Steve, great example earlier about PowerShell. I was amazed at how I could create 500 mailboxes in Exchange using PowerShell, and instead of having to use the or how to create a CAS server just from a couple of lines of script, right? So that type of stuff lends itself really well to the stuff that we're doing now. And I'm slightly going off on a tangent to the structure that we have, but I think it's good for this panel that we leave it open. And by the way, we've got a bunch of questions from the attendees that we'll ask as well. So, but just from my perspective, some of the technologies, some of the skills, actually a lot of the skills that I learned when I started out in IT, and the first kind of IT operating system I started working on was Windows Small Business Server 4.0, right? When I was in college, it was NT Server 3.5, right? So, and we learned all about DNS, and we learned all about wins and name resolution and all that cool stuff. And what's one of the key things for cloud computing that you need to know now is name resolution, networking. If you don't know that, even if you're in the dev space, you still need to know and understand, or at least should understand, how the architecture of your development platform connects back into a networking environment, how naming conventions work, how DNS works, and name resolution. Those skills that we've learned, in my case, 20 odd years ago, absolutely still valid now. Absolutely still valid. Yes, some of them are really old school and nobody's going to care about it anymore, but it's really important that, and this is what we talk to customers and students all the time. If you're worried, if you're still what we call a server hugger, right? So if you're still holding on and hugging those servers on-prem, that's okay, right? That's fine. But you have to realize, like if you, in the US, you remember Blockbuster, who sold the VHS, the VCRs, the DVDs, Netflix just owned that, right? And online streaming platforms own those products and those brands. So if you're still hugging your servers and you're looking at what's happening to the hardware environment, if you like, the hardware vendors out there, they're all consolidating. They're all trying to offer cloud. And you shouldn't be afraid of that. You should be thinking and considering, do you know what? Maybe I can take these skills, and maybe I'm an administrator of an on-premises environment here. Maybe I can be an administrator of a cloud environment. I'm a network engineer on-prem. Maybe I can be a network engineer in the cloud, and so on and so forth. I'm a developer on-prem. You get the point, right? But it's bringing those skills to the modern world and to modern technology, and they will absolutely, the majority of them will follow you. That's my 10 cents on the skills and where you go. Nick, you've stayed fairly quiet. I want to hear your where's your origin story?
So going back what Sam said, it's not all about the technology. So you can have, majority of the time it's about how you are as a person. So people skills as well. So if you get along with someone and you're rubbish at technology, people can train you. So So my career was in computer science, and I did a forensic computing degree, and I did a placement as a forensic placement. So it kind of shifted in that way. So majority of things, in theory, I will learn from university, but most of the hands-on, I have to just learn at home myself. And it's only when I truly started as my first IT support technician, so I got myself there. And then it's only throughout the pandemic then I wanted to shift to the cloud because I saw it's a big thing in the market. So yeah, short story. So it's majority of the time it's not all about the technology, what Steve said. So if you're a good person, hiring manager or technical manager can train you up if you got the ability to learn.
That's true. That's true. If you could see the right qualities in someone, that goes for any industry, to be fair. Like, I mean, degrees are awesome, and you know, college and university is awesome, but I'm a firm believer that you don't need that alone to just succeed, right? If you have the right attitude, if you have, yes, it helps to have the right contacts, but as a hiring manager, you know, if you're looking at somebody coming in for a role and maybe there's somebody else more qualified in terms of maybe higher degrees or higher certification from third level education, if the person is maybe configure logic better, or if they're better customer facing, for example, in the consulting world, sometimes it might be a better choice to go with the person without the degree. I'm not saying always, but you know, I often get folks saying to me, and you know, some of the questions in the chat are similar to certifications and asking in alignment with what certs are good to get a job. You know, qualifications are very important, super important, but they're not the be all and end all. And you can always retrospectively do qualifications or gain qualifications if you're in a role, even if you start at the very bottom in an organization and work your way up. If you've got the right support structure in that organization, they will help support you on your learning journey, and you'll get the real world hands-on experience as well as the theory and the logic that you need, obviously, to properly do that job.
Indeed, and Kevin, I'd like to touch on that piece, right? So I did my degree in microelectronics and computing. A lot of people that I graduated with, because I graduated into the recession, they had high scope degrees, and they had a massive head start because they got dropped into various jobs. What I managed to achieve by not having the same sort of start is considerably more in-depth, broader, and fulfilling for me than if I'd gone in, because they've ended up, I joke, they've ended up being end users because, you know, they were, you know, an engineer that created great technology. One of them worked for an organization that was doing fly-by-wire, but they still needed me to help them to install the operating system later in life. So the way I look at qualifications, especially when it comes, because this is a sensitive area that sometimes people have that imposter syndrome. So let me address it off the bat. It's really more for graduates. So if you are, you know, 2021 or whatever it is, and you've gone through the education system and your output is a degree, it can give you a head start. You know, growing up in Ghana, you couldn't even get an administrative job without A levels or otherwise. But as Kevin talked about, it's now by experience. So if you've got relevant, applicable experience, right, that can weigh a whole lot more than somebody that got, say, their degree 10 years ago, right? You may have that, but what have you done with it? And I had to transition into doing industry qualifications, and nearly, 20 years after graduating, I'm now looking at actually going to do my MBA, because I'm now in a leadership position where my technical vendor qualifications is not enough. But I always fall back on my technical qualifications, even though, you know, you've got young Nicholas coming along that Kevin is going to interview and go, you know what? He may not have all the experience of Sam, but he's cost effective, and I can train him, right? That's much better. So it's never feel it's about qualifications. It's always about relevance of experience to the role you are applying for. So you may have, you know, all of the certifications in Azure, but what have you done that is transferable even outside of that qualification? And how would you apply it in a real environment as a consultant, engineer, or otherwise?
I think that's a good point. And if I look at some of the questions here on the side of my screen, so Sid, and hey everyone for joining, thank you so much. So Sid has asked, it's fairly similar, thanks Nick for showing it up here. So Sid has asked, you know, is getting cloud certifications enough to land on a cloud job for a guy in IT app support for 10 plus years? You've completed AZ 900, which is the Azure Fundamentals exam, and you're now aiming for the AZ 104, which is the Azure Administrator exam. What more can I do to switch to a cloud job? I'll chip in on this one for Sid, right? So you've come on the other side, right? So I came from the server hugger world, right? So I'm hugging a server, and I was dragged kicking and screaming into the DevOps world, right? So I'm assuming you're coming from app support, you're going to be reasonably comfortable with development and coding and that type of stuff. So as Steve and the guys said earlier, you will find those skills much easier transferable into the cloud than, say, a traditional IT pro like myself had to do when I was learning how do I code, how do I do pipelines, how do I do Git repositories, and all this stuff that is completely alien, right? And we talked earlier about our when the three myself, Steve, and Sam originally met, and we were doing System Center. And I was doing a lot of System Center Operations Manager, which is the monitoring product in the suite of products. And when my boss at the time came to me and said, Kev, look, we need to get really serious as a company about Azure. We want to start up an Azure practice lead. As such, we had a couple of really strong folks doing Azure, but he asked me to take on the Azure practice lead role, and that was alien to me because I didn't know Azure very well at all, right? So I started with AZ900, Sid. I then went to AZ104, then AZ302, 303, AZ400. Basically, as Sam mentioned, through all of the industry certifications that I needed. And then I realized that the knowledge I had from my previous skill sets from 15, 20 years ago, I could start applying, oh, that's what they mean. All right, that's like such and such a configuration in Windows Server. Or that's like when I configured that router, or, and you're mapping it together. So to Sid's question, is it enough to switch to a cloud job? It depends on what that cloud job is, in my view. It's, if you're looking to come in as an administrator, like AZ900 is great to have, but an employer typically won't really reference that because it's the fundamentals. AZ104 is good. You would, in my view, and guys chip in when I'm done here, you would do well, Sid, to look at the architect exam, which is now AZ305, and then AZ400, which is DevOps. If you have 305, 400, and 104, you're in a really good place to maybe look at potentially a level 2 cloud role. What would you guys think? Steve, you're in the US, and Sam, you're in the UK. Is it similar over there for kind of qualifications?
I'll chime in. So to answer Sid's question directly, is that enough? No. Just full stop,
Yeah.
right? You don't have to, but there's several things that you can do to help you along this journey of moving into cloud. Number one, continue to invest in yourself. And so like Kevin was talking about, there's more certifications. Don't just stop pursuing those. The more you get, the deeper you get into the cloud space. Practice, right? And also evangelize around what you want to do. Not sure what type of organization you work for, if it's big, if it's small, if it's medium. But if it's a large organization, there's chances that there's probably a need for cloud people somewhere in your org. If you haven't already, tell that to your boss, tell that to other leaders, let people know, hey, I'm interested in growing in my career in cloud. Also, do things like, I'm gonna do a shameless plug here, but there's 100 days of cloud, right? Hashtag 100 days of cloud. You can find it on Twitter. That'll get you to a community and also to a GitHub. And there's like activities you can do in cloud, right? It'll take you through 100 days of those activities. Go there, clone those repos. If you don't have a GitHub, get your own GitHub, clone that, and start working on those projects. Now, the cloud providers have trials. So at Azure, we have a trial. You can get a trial. You can start working in cloud. Here's where the shameless plug comes in. So you're only going to get a small amount of credits for Azure, right? If you have access to Pluralsight, they acquired Cloud Guru, and so they have a bunch of these labs, and these labs are like 4 hours, and you can go through and do like a a step-by-step lab, or you can spin up one of these playgrounds that gives you a cloud environment for 4 hours, and you can go in there and do whatever you want, right? Within reason, right? You're not going to be able to run your own like Bitcoin mining machines or whatever in there, but within reason, you'll be able to do whatever you want. So you can go in there and you can practice, and you can get that hands-on. The other things that you'll want to do is continue to network. So we're on a virtual user group right now. If there's some in-person user groups where you live, get out to those user groups. Conferences, Sam talked about conferences. Make sure you go to some conferences, meet some other people, talk about what you're doing and what you want to do, right? And then Kevin talked about it, and actually I talked about it a little bit earlier too, like the PowerShell skills that I gained administering Exchange servers many years ago still help me today working with Kubernetes. And that may sound crazy, but it's all like coding. So that work I did back then helped me. And so the work you're doing as an app dev, like there's a ton of opportunities out here, right? In DevOps, as a cloud administrator, you're gonna be doing tons of scripting and app dev type stuff. Like take inventory of your current skills and figure out, like even do a mapping. What skills do I have today that apply to cloud? And highlight those on your resume, highlight those on LinkedIn, talk about those in interviews, right? When you go to that interview, have some stories ready of what you've done today. You know, you're an app dev. I know you've probably done some coding or some scripting or whatever, some automation. You know, that applies in a heavy way to cloud. And so be ready with those stories. And that's going to help you get into the space. I'll share one more thing and then I'll be quiet so others could talk. But I've had to pivot my career or rebrand myself several times. I think it's been about 4 times. And as Kevin and Sam and Nicholas talked about, like I didn't start with DPM, but DPM was what like got me into the System Center community, right? And so as soon as I got in, I was like, I don't want to be known as the DPM guy forever. Like there's all this other cool stuff that I want to work with. And so I had to like rebrand myself. And so I just made sure that I was working with all the other technologies and not just working with the technologies in a vacuum, but blogging about those, going out to forums, helping people, going to my boss at the time, pitching like, hey, we need to use this technology and here's why. Some things got accepted, some things didn't, right? And throughout my career, I've had to do that. And I'll have to do that in the future too, because at some point, I believe Kubernetes is going to be abstracted away. And so I always operate a level above the technology, right? I've done a lot of work with Sam and even Kevin over the years. And one of the things that attracted me to System Center was not 100% the technology, but because the technology was very closely aligned to ITIL and things like ITSM. And so I knew like, hey, if Microsoft decides to kill this suite of products at any given time, I'll just go retool on something else and I'll still be valuable in the market. And so when cloud came along, it's like, okay, ITIL doesn't go away. All that stuff's still needed in cloud. In fact, a lot of those processes are still utilized in cloud. A lot of it applies to Kubernetes and containers as well. It's not that different. Platform engineering, a lot of the stuff that I've learned from a process perspective in the past applies to platform engineering. Now there's some new things and some different things, but the point I'm trying to make here is the things you're doing now is foundational for cloud, and you need to be vocal about those things, the skills that you have, and use those to help propel yourself forward.
Cool. And I agree with all of that. I'm just going to add a practical lens to it, and I think Nicholas shared, right?
Because lots of things that Steve said is transferable, like skills and stuff. So everyone just be curious. So if you're curious about things in Azure, just learn about it. So, and then curiosity leads you to learning more, basically.
Indeed. And am I coming across still okay? Just want to make sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So I did a session and it's actually pinned to my LinkedIn profile. And the title of it was Day 2 Cloud. There's a guy called Ned in the Cloud. It was meant to be just a normal chat, but it ended up being a video. And I coined the phrase that, I advanced my career with curiosity and mistakes. And that's all it is. And to your question, outside of everything that Steve said, because it's in the middle of that, I always start with the job description out there, right? Because I read a lot, and just because you're a surfer doesn't mean you can make money by surfing, right? So you have the surfing skills, but are you learning to be a surf instructor so people will pay you for it? Because turning up and say, "Hey, I'm the best surfer," doesn't always tell the organization that you can help them to move forward. So I always say, start off with what they're looking for, then um, build a plan to develop into those spaces. And I think I've got like, a little sign at the back of me. I remind myself every time, says your value is finding empty spaces in crowded places, right? So just saying I want to do cloud is too broad. What specifically do you want to do? So I did a session in Prague recently. An example I've got in front of me here is how to create your own personal plan. So an example is I want to be a big data engineer or architect, right? And so my goal is AI and Gen AI experts in the next 12 months, right? What are my needs? I need to learn about data science, prompt engineering, large language model, right? What are my learning resources? There's a lot of free online resources that you can go to. There's formal education. And then what's my study plan going to be and what does that involve, right? So 2 to 4 hours a week, splitting across different topics, and then actually monitor and track my progress. How you can do that is like what Steve was saying. I learn by sharing. If I can't tell somebody about it, I started doing PowerShell. Now I got bored of just trying to do the function. So what I did was there was a product called Service Manager, and you had to do some turn off some services every time you needed to upgrade. So build a PowerShell solution that's in the tech gallery that allowed you to put a GUI in front of that to shut down the right jobs and everything. So I try and say, just having this skill, what can it do? Because when you walk into that interview and say, I've got AZ900 or whatever it is, they'll simply say, yeah, but what can you do with that? Right? I've read the recipes, but can you cook? Right? Because I'm looking for a chef. I'm not looking for somebody that can recite a recipe on how to make souffle. How many times have you made it? I'm just making this stuff up, by the way, because, like, I cook fried rice and other things like that. I don't bake because baking is too structured for me. I have to follow steps. But nobody would hire somebody that says they've read the cookbook. They'll hire somebody that's got a great reputation from working in a restaurant or actually sharing recipes, practical tips on how to make that great cuisine that the customers want. So that's my non-techie version of that journey. So I hope it helps.
I think some really great insights, and hopefully Sid just that's answered your question in a good bit more detail probably than you might have expected. But I'll have a look at some other questions. Some of these are fairly similar, guys, but we'll just have a look here. I'll just show some of these up on the screen. This one is from Neil. Hey, Neil. A slightly different question. As a lapsed architect, I get asked time and time again how to retrain into tech from a non-tech role and how to move back to tech if you're lapsed. I think we've covered that, but my 10 cents on this, and both Sam and Steve and Nick have already kind of covered it as well. Look at what's current in the market. Don't jump onto a technology just because somebody else is doing it. Look at something that you're passionate about. Look at something that you could see yourself, in a technology area that you could see yourself doing as a day job for the next few years at least. And then look at the industry certifications. Maybe there's third level certifications you can go back to college or uni to do at night and own them. But also follow the relevant community leaders in that space. Try and attend some in-person conferences. The networking and the learnings you make from those conferences are amazing. and then just own it in your own way. You don't have to become expert, but find what's passionate for you in those areas. And don't be afraid to do, if you're sticking with the Microsoft track or HashiCorp or any of the different vendors who have the industry certs, don't be afraid to do the fundamentals or the most basic exams first. There's no shame, there's no embarrassment in doing them. I know some folks who won't admit to doing them because they think it's too simple, but start right at the bottom and work your way up.
Indeed, Tech. And there's Kev, there's one last piece in here from my own personal experience, right? So going from tech to non-tech, I've bounced about a bit. I'll say this is where connections and relationships matter. So if you're already within an organization, they know you. So it's going to be easier for you to, like, Kev runs different teams. If you need to reboot your career into a different area, either within your organization or organizations where you've got connections and relationships, they can vouch for your previous tech strong background to give you a boost to go through that journey that Kev's talking about. So it's good that you can find that balance, but the journey for that is not going. I'm too young to be going back and say, hey, give me a chance. I want to start. My career ambition is actually never to apply for a role again, but I need to earn that, right? And the way you do that is people know who you are to that extent that they'll headhunt you. It hasn't happened yet, but that's my goal, regardless of it, right? Because then it doesn't matter where you're non-tech or tech, you've put enough out there and demonstrated enough for people to say, you know what, they may not be doing this, but when I knew them, they were doing this, and the attributes, the skills that they have, it's easy to train on a new technology than to train the soft skills and the other areas where organizations value even more.
Yeah, I agree totally, and I don't believe for 1 minute you haven't been headhunted in the past. Whether you think it or not, Sam, you definitely have.
Not by those I wanted to join, right?
Fair. But still, you're an asset. We've got another one. I'm loving the questions coming in, and I know we're going a little bit off kilter, but the folks are taking the time to spend online with us, and let's see if we can get some of these answers back for them. A lot of the questions are of the same vein, so if we're covering the same kind of topics, we'll skirt over them quickly. This one is in from Brandon. So fresh off getting AZ900 Azure Fundamentals and DP900, which is the Data Platform Fundamentals, but your current role is not cloud-based at all. Is it safe to just start up personal projects, labs, and utilize that for experience when applying for jobs? I'm going to just revert back to what Steve said earlier, and I forgot to mention, and Steve, I know you're very involved in Pluralsight, but I have to say, well before you were involved in Pluralsight, I found that platform awesome for learning. I thought the video training, some of the speakers that we had, and even on this, Nick, in recent times, were or still are Pluralsight authors, and that stuff is amazing. So Brandon, from my perspective, the exams will give you the theory, and both of those certs that you've done are just fundamentals. So you do need to now springboard them from a certification perspective, but get as much hands-on as you can with the video training, the sandbox training, which is really important, because you can break stuff, right? And nobody's going to give out to you, or nobody's going to make you lose your job. And I think you can really benefit from that one as well. What do you think, guys?
Hey, Kevin, the check is in the mail, or I mean, the crypto is in your wallet. So thanks for the the plug there.
So genuinely, it's a great platform, though. It really is.
So shameless plug. I'm a Pluralsight author as well, and so I've done like 23 courses. So I actually have some AZ900 content out there, as well as some other cloud content. And Ned Bellavance was mentioned. He's got great courses out there. So if you want to get started with Terraform, which is one of the technologies I recommend, definitely check that out. Brandon, I don't know if this is Brandon Anderson from Minnesota, but if it is, shout out to you. It's been a long time. Hit me up and we'll talk. If not, hit me up anyway on Twitter and we can chat. Oh, it is. Hey, good to see you on the stream, and hit me up. We'll talk about we could talk about cloud and like moving more into cloud. So what's the question? Oh, is it safe to just start up personal projects, labs, utilize? Yeah, so absolutely. So we'll talk after the stream, but grab credit. You can get credit from all three cloud providers. Once you get that credit, you have access to everything. Also, each one of the cloud providers has a number of services that are free forever. You'll need to go look up that list. I think I have the list for Azure somewhere, so I can share that with you. But you'll have to be careful of that you don't get like a massive bill on accident. But there are certain services that are free forever, and there's limits on those services. But you could continue to use those services for free. And then again, the other thing is if you have, oh, you are using a cloud guru, so perfect. Um,
So,
definitely check out those 4-hour playgrounds. Like I use those sometimes, even to this day, right? I'll spin up stuff in there and work through stuff.
so in my perspective, you can actually use dev tenant, the developer tenant. They give you some services free. So look into that, Brendan. So some of them like Teams, some of them like some Azure stuff as well. It's just like a sandbox for people to learn.
Do you have a can you like show the or share the URL for that, Nicholas?
Yeah,
For
yeah,
everyone?
will.
Yeah, drop it into the chat. Okay, thanks for the question, Brandon. Let me see. Next up, we have there's a couple more guys. Dolapo, I'm hoping I'm saying your name correctly. If I'm not, I apologize. Great to see you guys. What do you think of the technologies one should learn this year in the cloud Azure ecosystem? I'm going to hand this over to Sam and Steve. Sam, we go to you first. What's your thoughts? And obviously, everyone probably have different answers to this, but from your perspective, what's your thoughts?
So what I would say is that it's what's within those ecosystems, right? So it's no secret or no surprise that everybody's all over Gen AI and AI. So if I were to be starting in this space, I'll be looking at all the AI connections that they have within Azure and the Azure ecosystem, because a lot of the other third-party plugins, etc., are now going through this middle layer, right? And also from a cloud perspective, at the conference in Prague, I was actually talking to people that are still on-prem. So there's still people that are in the migration journey. So focusing on the parts of Azure that have now streamlined, migrating from on-prem into the cloud, that would also be another space that I'll think about. And Kev, you're in that space. You've got the bell curve, right? You had the early innovators, and now it's a laggers world where those that couldn't shift that quickly. So I'll say look at the different stages that organizations are in, and then decide, are you going to be going for small businesses, small to medium, or large organizations? Because they drive where your focus will be in these areas in terms of learning to be ready for it.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. Steve, any or Nick, even conscious of your contribution on these questions from the audience. Anything you want to add on this one, Nick?
What do you think you like? So, yeah. So aside from that, aside from what Kevin and Sam said, it's AI. So AI, and then you can also do the Microsoft Apply Skills, which give you like it's more practical as well as your certifications.
It's good. Yeah, good tips. Everyone's saying AI. AI is the buzz in the tech world at the moment, but you're only going to get so far if you don't have a lot of the behind the scenes technology and understanding of them first. Steve, we'll close out this question with you.
Yeah, sounds good. So I put a very long response in the chat. You can share that with Delapo. But
Sure.
I'll answer here too. So I pulled up your LinkedIn page, and it looks like you have a really great background. I'll repeat what everyone else has said, like Gen AI. It's the buzz, and seriously, like look at Copilot, the stuff that's happening there. Some amazing stuff, right? And I would look at Gen AI as like an assistant for you, an accelerator for the things you already do. And then I would look at like GitHub Copilot. If you're not already using that, check it out. There's a few different levels as far as licensing, but if you are a student or contribute to a well-known open source project, you can actually get a free license of GitHub Copilot. But I would definitely check that out and start using it, and use it as a learning assistant too. Like it's a great tool to help you pick up a new language. So if there's something you've been putting off for a long time, like, hey, I want to go learn that language or that scripting, language, like combine that with some Gen AI, put the two together and go learn that language, right?
Yeah.
Other things, if you don't already have it, like anything that's going to help with automation, Terraform, Pulumi. Again, not trying to hit the dead horse, but containers, right? Go learn Docker, learn Kubernetes. There's a lot of stuff there. Crossplane is another great one. And then again, any of the cloud providers, right? There's so many services on the cloud providers. I can't name everything. But like AZ900 has been thrown out there a lot. There's other Azure certifications if you want to go deeper beyond the AZ900. And on the AWS and GCP side, they have equivalent kind of starter certifications as well. But we're in a multi-cloud world. Learn one cloud and then go transfer those skills to another cloud as well. But make sure you're using Azure too.
So I want to add something.
On that note, I'll close out because I do need to drop. But this is great. Really enjoyed connecting with you, Nicholas, and like having a mini reunion with Kevin and Sam. This has been awesome.
Thanks a million, Steve. Great.
Okay, thanks for coming.
We'll catch up offline, Steve, again. All right.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
See you, buddy.
Bye.
Sam, are you okay to hang on for a while?
Oh yes, I am. So
Cool.
You got me here. Looks like I'm fielding all the questions on behalf of Steve, right?
We'll tag team and we'll get through what we get through. Don't worry about it.
So I want to add something on that last point what Steve covered. So you don't need to learn a lot about like expert in everything like containers, Kubernetes, or anything. You just learn the foundation. So learn the basic of Gibbs, learn the basic of like Pulumi or containers and stuff. You don't need to go in depth about it. So as long as the employer can see that you got a bit of knowledge and you know a bit about it, it's fine.
Absolutely. Okay, so what we'll do, I think, is we'll hold off on some of the attendee questions and try and get a little bit back on script, because we've got some great insights that we want to extract from Sam's brain now on some of these other additional questions. Nick, do you want to ask one of the questions that you were thinking about for Sam? Or do you want
so I got a question that I want to ask. So from your career or throughout your like journey to where you are now, what's the biggest challenge on important things you learned that lead you to where you are now?
Great question, and I have to caveat it with another lens, right? So I'm also from the minority group, right? So I've had a number of challenges, but they haven't been restrictive. And when I talk about minority group, it's diversity of mindset, not just the skin, right? So some of the biggest challenge I've had is being able to convince leadership that something that I've heard about or have researched and worked on is worth investing in as an organization, and then also worth investing in myself from a skills development, because what we do is everything is challenging. So it's really those lenses that have been challenging. Everything else I've been able to dig in. So I'll say it's really, to be very specific about your question, is you go on a training course or you go to a conference or otherwise, and then you bump into Kevin, and Kevin's like, hey, you need to do this. This is coming up. And then you come back in house and you've got, I've coined the phrase, right? What we're trying to do is based on use cases, but I've always had the naysayers or the misuse cases that will come up with all the reasons why something won't work, right? So that's been the biggest challenge in trying to like either drive change based on your knowledge and coming up against sometimes our own technical people that come up with 1,000 ways in which this wouldn't work. And I and Kevin, we've made our career by blogging about the deficiencies in code or the deficiencies in products. Whereas I've come up against people that have said, you can't do it because it doesn't do it yet, right? So learning those soft skills that allowed me to drive people from competing with you to destroy what you're trying to do to collaborating with you in order for all of us to win. Bit philosophical, but that's because now I'm playing with the C-suite, right? That expects me to use language. So if I need to come down to the geek level, just let me know, Nicholas. I hope they help. But Kevin, I could ask you the same question.
You know what? That's actually a really good point. Because we're talking a lot about tech here, okay? But at least from throughout my career, and even when I worked in Burger King part time, to be my view is to be really good at a job. I'm not saying it's the only quality or it's one that everyone should have, but one that I find is very useful is try and figure out how to be a really good communicator. Okay, so that doesn't necessarily mean language spoken in terms of your accent or how you speak. It's exactly what you said there, Sam. Like I'm a consultant by trade, right? And my team, we're all consultants, so we will regularly need to switch from C-level conversations to level 400 conversations at a tech, right? But going back to maybe some of the folks online who are watching this might take some solace from this. The best techie isn't always the best consultant or the best engineer, right? Because I'm not saying it's easy to learn tech, but it's, in my view, easier to learn tech than it is to learn how to be a really good communicator. And that also involves what we call conflict resolution, conflict management. All is not rosy in the world. If you're an administrator or a developer and you're working on a production workload or you're managing a production workload and that goes down, you need to understand quickly how to have really good communication and conflict resolution skills. Because if you don't, and if you start communicating out those issues badly, well, then people's faith in your ability to be a technical guru, if you like, of that specific area will quickly come to question for you. So if you're good at communicating, awesome. If you're looking or trying to figure out how do I become a good communicator, you can watch a bunch of videos, there's hundreds of videos online for all kinds of communication courses. I find helping out locally with my kids' soccer teams, or I taught martial arts, Sam, you and I have spoke many times about martial arts, stuff like that. If you have a role at home or, in your community where maybe you're doing some voluntary work that involves you having to stand at the top of a room or the top of a football pitch and basically give people instruction, well, then that will go a long way to being a really good technical consultant or engineer or people person. So hopefully I've kind of picked up on what you said there, Sam, but it was something I hadn't thought about when we talked about some of the, let's call them soft skills as opposed to hard tech skills that you need.
Human skills. So Nicholas, your next question, please. Kev's going to bail me out if I get it wrong.
Yeah, so in theory, you need to communicate to the leadership team. So we're like non-technical to non-technical people, like CTO, people that's non-technical, communicate to a wide range of teams. Okay, so the next skills that I've got is What the most important qualities that make you have a successful career
in tech? So it's a great one. I mean, it opens my mind to different directions. One is check your ego, right? I can't say that enough. I am very, very lucky and privileged that I still get invited to go and speak at conferences. And every time I go in there, I assume I'm the dumbest person in the room because without that attitude, um, it becomes very apparent that it's about you and not what you can do for others, right? So that's one, and the other quality is also having a scientific mindset, right? I did a session called, IT tech to IT scientists in the cloud world, right? You can't suddenly think I'm a guru in this because I remember once doing a session, I was doing a demonstration on Azure Dev Labs, right? I'd rehearsed the demonstration and I went live, and Microsoft had changed where everything was. It broke my demo, right? So it's having that continual mindset to say, all right, fine, it's going to be an experiment each time. But the best way to do experiments is to first know to plan for what you want to get, to say, here's my experiment, do it, check the outcome, learn from it, right? So in the old days when I started, we used to call them the registry butchers, right? Something happens and they go into the registry and start making changes to keys randomly, but they can't remember what they changed. And it meant that when you ask them to go and repeat it or do it for somebody else, panic ensued. So um, what I used to do was I would implement something for a client, document it, tell them to back it up, and then delete the configuration and just watch people's faces go, oh, I'm like, well, you know, that's the best way to test your backup and your documentation, right? So if you can't break it now, can you imagine the pain that it will cause in 2 years' time? So that's the other attributes, knowing that, you need to be evergreen, you need to be humble in your knowledge, and then also understand that technology, for the sake of technology, doesn't matter. I've known people that have trained as IT technicians from being accountants, but their focus is being a technician supporting accounting software like SAP, etc. So it's really, I can't emphasize enough on the first part, which is like, it's not bragging if you can back it up. But I love Usain Bolt because he had fun whilst he was bragging and drew people into him. Whereas you've got other runners that are just like, stand there and they're bouncing about. When they lose, everybody laughs. It's not nice. But, everybody willed Usain to win because they were looking for that humble but backed celebration. So I would say those are the key attributes.
I think as well, if you're going to talk the talk, walk the walk, but do it in a humble fashion.
Yeah.
Fair point.
I agree with that.
So Nick, do you want to ask another question, or let me just have a quick look and see if we got any more in the chat? I think I missed one or two. So actually I will grab one here. I'll just show this one up. This is from Yemen. I got AZ900 and have a computer science degree, still not able to get a job with Azure. Okay, so hopefully, Yemen, we've already covered this, that AZ900, I totally appreciate that it may have been difficult, or I'm not sure if you found it easy to do, but any of the 900 Microsoft exams are fundamentals. So they are entry level. So obviously your computer science degree trumps an AZ900, right? But a computer science degree may or may not include, I don't know what exactly the curriculum was for that, but may or may not include technologies that are relevant to Azure. What it will show is that you're diligent and you've lasted through a very rigorous educational process, and you've come out of it with a a very technical degree. But if you want to get a job in the cloud, this could be anything, maybe not just Azure, but it's also about contacts. But if you don't know anyone and you're just sending your CV in, you will definitely need, unless it's an entry level 100 kind of support role initially, you will need to add more certifications to that Azure certification list. They're not too difficult, but you've got a process and a learning path to follow before you can get to that point. Or have a look at, a lot of companies will have graduate programs and postgraduate programs. So that's where you get in with your degree, and you can come in and you can take a role in a company which might not be specifically working in the cloud space that you want, but it's a role that has career prospects to move to that once you ramp up on the additional industry certifications as well. So I think I'll move on from that one, if that's all right, guys. Just conscious of time, and we've covered a bunch of them. Then yes, have you got something now, Nick?
We can ask, because the question from Agam is pretty much the same. What are the best reasons in Azure to work on containers as beginners?
Yeah, so that one, Steve spoke about that one, and you've got some good experience on containers, Nick.
Yeah, so you can either do some projects, or you can do Microsoft Learn or A Cloud Guru. Yeah, so just go to like Docker and just explore the help and Docker, try to play with the Docker as well. So, and you build your own, like for example, website, anything with it as a container. You go from there.
Cool. Okay, that's all the attendee questions. So, what have we got left for Sam? See if we can find something really difficult to. No, I'm kidding. We've asked, obviously, for these folks, for these type of webinars, we do tend to have some pre-canned questions, just in case we don't have much interaction with the audience. To be fair, I think we've asked and answered most of the questions that we had pre-canned.
Yeah. So there's one question that I would like to know. So, what challenges did you face while working with a multidisciplinary team across different regions and cultures? Like someone like a big global company like PwC, how do you think they have worked with different teams across different environments?
Great question.
It's a fabulous question, right? And the reason why I say that is I've been very lucky that throughout my career, when I've joined large organizations, they've been multi-corporate organizations, and we've had to work with different teams, with different cultures and stuff like that. So some of my early challenges, which now I am much better at, like for instance, working with people from cultures that are not based on linear time, right? So I'll share results that you can use. So what I mean is that growing up in Ghana, somebody will say, "Yeah, I'll be around there soon," right? Or "I'll come around when the sun goes down," right? So we're okay. It's like, "Are you coming now? Or are you coming now?" Right? That draws a lot of chaos when I'm working with my Swiss colleagues who say, "I'll be there at 5 minutes past," and if you turn up at 7 minutes past, you've violated that. So it's learning. That was one of the first things where I was just like, I was waiting for a part to be delivered, and I'd ask, "Well, is it going to be there?" Yeah, it's going to be there. And then I turned up, and it wasn't there. But what I didn't check in with them was that culturally, that's not the way they communicate. So there's a great book called the Culture Map by Erin Meyer. So it's really learning how to negotiate. So I manage teams in India, for instance, where they're fantastic people, super, super smart, but no, it's usually not part of the vocabulary. So I go, "Well, would you have this ready by Tuesday?" And they'll go, "Yes," right? But having worked long enough with them, it's my expectation, not what they can actually do. So I'll go back and go, would it be better if we did it on Friday, right? And they'll go, oh, yeah, that would be better for me. And then over time, as a leader, I learned to coach them to share that information in the manner in which they're comfortable. So I'll say, the toughest challenge is understanding that there's a diversity in culture and mindset, and the ways you communicate is not based on your style, right? Because um, dealing with, if I go to, other parts of the world, or, you go on a call, it can come across as rude if you don't ask how people are. But if I'm dealing with some other cultures, they're like, look, cut out the fluff, you know, you know, we need to move to bluff, which is bring the bottom line up front. What do you want from me? Right. So that's been some of the toughest things. And I'm a storyteller, right? The irony is that today in the corporate world, they're teaching people how to tell stories, right? Earlier in my career, because I've learned to communicate, and I plugged my book earlier of Men and Spiders. I grew up where the lessons I was taught with a story, but depending on your relationship with that person, like, hang on, I don't understand it. Can you make it simple for me? I'm like, I can't, because I'm still trying to understand it, right? So I try and tell stories and stuff like that. So I'll say um, the multidiscipline teams is making sure that you give everybody a voice, because there are going to be some people that culturally or personally they can't talk. So knowing how to engage with them and uniting everybody around the mission, because um, there was a phrase I once heard, which is you shouldn't be teaching people how to build ships. You should teach them to yearn for the wide open sea to go sailing. So that's what I mean about uniting them around the mission. So um, how you bridge everybody together is what are we trying to do rather than how you do it. So long-winded answer to the short question, Nicholas, but I hope it helps to add a bit of flavor. And Kev can probably give us an Irish version of this, right?
No, like I mean, I spoke earlier about being in Ireland and us being a tech hub, but it's great hearing about those kind of more diverse teams, like global teams, right? So, like the company I work for, quite a large IT services company in Ireland, called Ergo, and I'm there nearly 20 years, right? So, like I've had a number of roles in Ergo, but we don't have teams. Well, we have teams globally, but not to the scale that you will have seen in your career, Sam, even in the UK, right? Or Steve in the US. And I really like some of the stories and the way you pitched it. You know, you're right. Sometimes it's not black and white. It's not just this the way we need it done. I suppose my 10 cents of managing teams is that nobody is the smartest person in the room. Everybody can learn from people. You know, if we do something on my team, if we implement something, or if we're putting some standards in, we'll have an open discussion. We'll do a majority vote. Sometimes you can't get everyone to agree, to be fair, but it should be open communication. And it's back to that communication thing we were talking about earlier. But I do love the stories and the methods that you have, Sam, to bring people into the same line of thinking without coming across as more a dictator, because that doesn't get results. It might get short-term results, but it won't get long-term results. And that's more soft skills again as you move through your career in tech, maybe up into management or team lead roles. They're the type of soft skills that you're really going to need to understand and learn from. Cool. I think that's really good.
Yeah.
So, Nick, any other questions? I've all done on mine.
No.
Coming in.
I'm all done now.
Okay, I think we'll wrap it up. We're coming up to not far off 8:30 p.m. GMT. So I think I really enjoyed that, Sam. It's great, always great catching up with you, Sam. Probably this is one of the first times we've caught up like this, though, right? We normally catch up in person, but it's great having you and obviously Steve on sharing your insights. And I find sometimes these type of panel discussions can be very, very useful for people either starting out in the tech industry or maybe people who are already in the tech industry might not be happy or might feel they need an extra kind of motivation or some pointers. And hopefully some of the attendees have gotten that from our talk today.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, both of you.
Because the aim of this podcast is inspire people that's unmotivated, haven't got the motivation to carry on, even they've been on the career for quite a long time. People just don't have that drive anymore. That's why. So hopefully by watching this, they could give them the spark, to ignite that the motivation again.
Hopefully
Indeed,
so.
and just to reiterate, I'm still very accessible. You can hit me up on LinkedIn or any of the other platforms. I may not always respond immediately, but if you do need some time, just have a conversation more one-to-one. Be respectful, and I'll be equally respectful, but happy to share whatever we can. And we have multiple dimensions, so depending on what you need to know. I've been in the industry for quite a while, and I don't say I'm experienced. I simply say I've got a lot of scars, right? So just let me know what I can do to avoid you getting more scars and reducing that.
Awesome.
So speaking of scars, Sam, how would someone reduce that scars for someone else? So if you were to help someone not get those scars, like potential trap pit.
And that's great question, right? So when I talk about scars, it's mistakes I made that I wish I didn't make, right?
Yeah.
And I would say it's a journey from calling a friend to using Google to using our AI tools. So
Okay.
to avoid it, make sure you are networking and learning from other people's mistakes. And where other people have built something, focus on making it better or coming up with different ways. So how I'll share that is, look, we've been down the path. I fell in love with technology a long time ago, only to realize that, I had to change roles, and that technology, I was now a beginner. So I fell in love with what the technology does, which is like one of those pieces. So I've seen a lot of questions around, I've got this certification. What I would like to share back in terms of that scar is knowing what to do in that domain trumps any certification you can have if you manage to establish the right relationships with the right people that are asking for that job. So I looked at job advertisements, and previously I used to treat it like a checkbox. I don't have this, I don't have that, I don't have that. Now, if I go for a role, I just read and think, what are they trying to do? And then just go in and say, you know what? I'm going to have a conversation. I'll tell them I've got a beginner level Azure certification, but I've got a computer science degree. But more importantly, I traveled around South Asia, overcame these challenges. That is what's applicable to this. So it's really learning that what is written down as advertised isn't always what's going to get you the role that you need. Because once you're there, you can grow. But you, as an interesting person, or the relationships you have, are what going to give you that extra boost and avoid those scars. Because you know what? You can get a job that you meet all the certifications, but you'd be very miserable because you didn't ask the right questions as to what this really does, right? You get put in there, I've got this Azure certification, and suddenly you find that all you're doing is you're running some very simple tasks with your big certification.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So speaking to what Sam said, when you see a job description that say 10 years experience and you only have 2 years, don't be afraid to apply, give it a shot, because it's not always true. Hiring manager just want to see what you have that you show them.
Yeah, and if the hiring manager, if you're not suitable for that role, and once you're upfront, right, once you don't lie about it, right, but once you're upfront, if you're not suitable, there may well be other roles in the company that haven't yet been advertised, and they might have you in mind for it as well. So it's worth shooting your shot when you have the opportunity, but also I guess knowing your limits as well, right? There's no point in me going in for a job interview for a doctor, for example, and just But I agree. Don't be completely put off if you feel you can do it, and maybe some of the stuff, some of the requirements for that role are, well, maybe on the surface of it look prohibitive. If you're not confident enough to rock up to the interview and then tell them, send them an email, communicate, ping them, find out how you can get in contact with the hiring manager, or at least get a message to them to say, look, I don't have the year's experience, but I do have this certs, I have this, would really love to talk to you. Most hiring managers will make the time, for sure. Cool. All right, Nick, do you want to wrap it up then? And we'll wish everyone a happy year again, and we'll see them again in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, sure. Let me just play a little video for next episode, and then we can just wrap up. Okay, thanks for joining, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
See ya.